Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're going to take a look at Smith & Wesson's entry into the U.S. Army XM10 pistol trials. So this is, of course, the follow-up to the XM9, as you might suspect. The XM9 was the U.S. military plan to replace 1911s and revolvers and all of its other semi-standardized handguns with a single new modern 9mm handgun. And trials took a number of years. Ultimately, the contract was awarded in 1985 to Beretta, resulting in the Beretta M9 that we're all familiar with today. Now, there had originally been 10 or so different entrants into that competition. Smith & Wesson was one of them. Smith & Wesson entered its Model 459A into that trial. And it's kind of, well, I've got one right here. In fact, it's your pretty much standard alloy frame, steel slide, 9mm, double stack magazine, DA, SA action. We'll take a closer look at this in comparison to this guy in a moment. But in essence, Smith & Wesson did pretty well in those trials, although it wasn't good enough to win. It specifically failed the service life requirements and the firing pin energy requirements. Now, skipping forward a couple of years here, the contract goes to Beretta, not without significant controversy, especially when shortly after the gun is adopted, there start being problems with slides cracking and even breaking. So on September 30th, 1987, the U.S. Army announced a follow-up trial, and this was specifically not going to replace the M9. They maintained that the M9 had won the trials and deliberately, fairly and effectively so, and it was the standard pistol, but they needed about 142,000 more pistols, and they were willing to buy something else aside from Beretta M9s, and that would be the M10, hence the XM10 trials. Now, only 4 companies actually submitted designs to the XM10 trials. That would be Tanfoglio with their TZ75, which is a copy of the CZ75, Browning with their BDA, Browning Double Action, Ruger with its P85, and Smith & Wesson making a reprise of the Model 459, although this time it was the 459M with a number of changes from the original XM9 trials pistols. So this is one of those 459M XM10 trials guns. Let's take a look at it and I'll show you what's a little bit different about it. The most obvious difference right off the bat is that this pistol has an extended magazine. This was not the standard magazine generally issued with these guns. That would be, well, a standard 9mm Smith & Wesson magazine, which looks like this. This is the extended 20-round magazine. These were made specifically for the XM10 trials. You can see it's got a steel bar welded on here as an over-travel stop. That's going to hit right there, prevent you from jamming the magazine too far in. These magazines are extremely rare. So they only made 40 of these pistols. I don't know how many of the 20-round magazines were made, but this is the only one I've yet actually seen out in the wild. There is not much in the way of markings on this guy, just Smith & Wesson on the slide and a serial number down here on the frame. By the way, the frame is aluminum alloy. All the rest of the steel parts are Parkerized. And you can kind of see that on the back, like the hammer is Parkerized, the sights are Parkerized, but the safety lever here is blue. Interestingly, we have an actually a Parkerized barrel and barrel bushing. Now, here is a standard Model 459. These were originally made for law enforcement. They were used by the FBI. Really actually pretty small production model for Smith & Wesson. They only made about 1,800 of these, and the XM9 and XM10 trials pistols were both modified versions of the standard 459. So what are the differences? Well, a bunch of them you can see from right here. The XM10 had a squared off trigger guard. Note that they've checkered the front of it. That's to give you this sort of shooting stance. The idea being this helps you hold the front of the pistol down, control it better. This is a shooting technique that was popular at the time, not so much anymore. The Parkerized barrel is distinct to the XM10 version. There is an ambidextrous safety up here on the slide. So M10 has the lever on both sides. The XM10 version has a wider, larger extractor. So it's longer and wider, presumably more reliable, more effective. to get through the military endurance and other trials. If we really look more closely, you can see that the XM10 on the left has a wider rear sight notch than the XM9. That's getting pretty nitpicky, but the front sights there, I know they're blurry, but front sights are exactly the same, but the XM10 rear sight is a little bit wider. And then one non-visible difference is the fact that the standard 4.59 has a magazine safety, so it won't fire without a magazine in the gun, where the XM10, and yes, I did check this, does not have a magazine safety. So no mag, it will still fire. Of course, the XM10 will use the standard magazines. That's what it most of the time did use, just had the 20 rounder as an extra addition for the XM10 trials. And then the trials themselves were pretty much all the standard stuff you would expect. Long-term durability, reliability testing, and then harsh condition tests, mud, water, sand, corrosion, exposure, all of that sort of stuff. So really pretty standardized requirements. On top of all that, of course, the gun has to be accurate, has to be easy to take apart, has to be, well, and it all comes down to it has to be the cheapest thing available that passes all the tests. Mechanically, the XM10, or the 459M, is a pretty standard Browning tilting barrel style of system. So the barrel drops down. It's a short recoil system. When the slide comes back a little bit, the barrel drops down to unlock. We have a single action or double action firing system. We have a frame-mounted decocker and safety. So once it's in the downward position, I can no longer fire, and it decocks the hammer in the process. Notice that when I engage the decocker, the hammer moves back just slightly. That holds it out of position, which makes it more drop safe. So those are the basic controls. You've got a magazine release right there. To take the slide off, we take out the slide stop. We're going to run this notch back to right there in line with the slide stop, and then I'm just going to poke on the back side of this. There we go, with a nice little non-marring wooden chopstick. That allows me to pull out the slide stop. And make sure the hammer is down and the slide comes off. We then have a non-captive recoil spring and its guide rod, barrel bushing, which comes out, and then the barrel that comes out. Again, the XM10 Trials version specifically has a parkerized barrel and barrel bushing, unlike all the rest of the 459 variants. Inside the frame, again, this is an aluminum frame. We have a stirrup style of trigger connection running around both sides of the magazine, and of course it's double action. That right there is our ejector. Drops down so the slide can chamber around over it. And then the safety, in addition to acting as a decocker, you can see that when the safety is in position, it is going to physically block the firing pin from being hit by the hammer, as well as retracting the hammer slightly. Lot of good redundant safety elements on the pistol. The barrel locks on this round locking lug. This is not yet of the designs that lock on the chamber itself. So there's your locking recess in the slide, which matches up to this ring on the barrel. And the unlocking is done by this trapezoidal cam. So there's over the life of Browning style automatic pistols, there's been a progressive improvement from Browning's original swinging link, well, I guess originally Browning's paired links, to Browning's single swinging link, to the High Powers cam slot, to this even simpler system of a pair of trapezoidal lugs on the outside of the barrel there. It occurs to me some people are going to wonder, why is this particular pistol in basically immaculate condition if it was used in these rigorous military trials? And the answer is there were more pistols provided for the trials than the military actually needed for all of said trials. The intention was to have spares, so if anything happened to a gun, you had plenty of extras to work with, in addition to simply using them as sort of a quality control. Make sure that You know, if a company supplies 30, are they all parts interchangeable? That sort of thing. So this is an example that didn't go through, say, the corrosion trial or the thousands of rounds endurance trial. And in fact, it probably didn't go through any specific trials, but it was one of the guns supplied by Smith & Wesson for the trials program. And it's one of very, very few that came out onto the civilian market afterwards. The first round of XM10 trials winnowed the field down a bit, and there was a final trial held in 1988. And in that one, there were only 3 pistols. One of them was actually the Beretta M9, essentially as a control, and the other 2 were Smith & Wesson with this pistol and Ruger with the P85. And the Ruger and the Smith & Wesson, what they had to do was outperform the Beretta in order to essentially gain the status of pistol M10. And the result is neither one did. Beretta did better in these trials than both Ruger and Smith & Wesson. As a result, the Army opted simply to maintain the Beretta, and the extra pistols that it needed that would have been M10 pistols, they just bought more Beretta M9. So that was the end of the XM10 program, and that was the end of Smith & Wesson's hopes and possibilities of getting a military-adopted standard sidearm. There were a grand total of just 40 of these made, and very, very few of them made it out onto the civilian market. Only a couple are actually known. So very cool to see this one, especially with its fancy special 20-round extended magazine. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.